Breaking news at this hour regarding wide receiver Brandon Marshall. The Denver Broncos have shipped Marshall to the Miami Dolphins for this year's second-round selection and next year's second-round pick. Again, Brandon Marshall to Miami for 2 twos, this year's 2 from Miami and next year's 2 from the Dolphins. We call in now Jason Lockenfor. And Jason, want to know your thoughts on what this means for both teams. Let's begin with the Miami Dolphins.
Paul, I think it's a trade both teams had to make for various reasons. For the Dolphins, wide receiver was probably the primary need in that entire organization. They have some good, decent young possession receivers, but not a game breaker, not a playmaker, not someone who can come in and immediately help elevate and develop your quarterback, Chad Henne. They have that now in Brandon Marshall. They didn't have to disrupt the top part of their draft in terms of the first round, their first day pick. They retained that. One of the second rounds is a year from now. Hey, Bill Parcells is trying to win right now. We'll worry about 2011. In 2011, when you have the chance to get someone as good and a 100-catch guy and a game breaker like Brandon Marshall.
You look at the Denver Broncos, they are without someone who was a headache inside that locker room, but they also lose their #1 playmaker. So do you think it's a good deal for Denver?
I think it's a trade they had to make when there's this kind of value on the table, Paul, because he was not going to be a part of this organization moving forward long term. There was trust issues. There were problems between him and Coach McDaniels. There were a lot of mitigating factors that prevented them from giving him the kind of long-term deal that, frankly, his play on the field had merited. This is about off-field issues in the same way the San Antonio Holmes deal a few days back was about off-field issues. You're never going to quite get maybe the value you think the player warrants given those situations and the fact that you feel like you have to unload him before the draft. But to get 2 second-rounders for him gives them the wherewithal to now maybe take a Dez Bryant in the first round to replace Brandon Marshall, and you've got an asset in the second day of the draft now where you can help add and upgrade your team in other areas.
You say one of the reasons they get rid of Brandon Marshall, and I agree, is that there were trust issues in the locker room. Do you get rid of one player like that and use selection number 11 on Dez Bryant? And to be honest, many people are questioning if there will be trust issues, professionalism issues with Dez Bryant at the next level.
That's the $25 million question, and that's what they're going to have to figure out as an organization as they continue to investigate, do their detective work into Dez Bryant. I mean, the thing you hear about Dez more than anything else is just immaturity. And, you know, he had such a difficult upbringing, and he's been through so much already in his young life. You talk to people who know him well, they say this is a kid with a good heart, with a sweet heart, but he can be led astray. He could potentially fall into some of the traps that are there for these athletes when they get this kind of money thrown at them at such a young age. It's an organizational decision. Owner Pat Bowlen will obviously have to sign off on it. But in terms of the skill set and finding someone who can plug in and be a Brandon Marshall type, he's the guy. And they'll have to figure out if they can make it work between he and Coach McDaniels, or maybe they look in another direction. But Dez Bryant's certainly on their short list of first-round candidates.
I'm interpreting it from you, Jason, not just as a short list, but you would think it would be a real surprise if they didn't go Dez Bryant at 11.
If I was putting together a mock draft right now, I would give them Dez Bryant at 11.
All right, who are you giving to the Dolphins at number 12?
It's interesting. Maybe they look for a pass rusher like Sergio Kindle. Maybe the linebacker McClain makes some sense for them as well from Alabama. The thing about them now is they don't have to force anything. Before, they really felt like maybe we have to take a receiver here just because it is such a pressing need. Now it's not that. You know, Joey Porter's gone. Jason Taylor pretty much has 1.5 feet out the door going to the Jets in all likelihood. So someone who can make some hay coming off the edge, attack the quarterback, be aggressive. That's an area where I look for them to try to address with where they sit there in kind of the middle portion of the first round.
The draft value is going to be a term that's going to continue to be addressed throughout this day regarding this trade. Again, the trade is Brandon Marshall from Denver to Miami for this year's second-round selection and next year's second-round pick. Tell us why you think it's good value for both teams.
Well, for Denver's standpoint, they weren't going to get the one. They can put the first-round tender on him. That's great. But we've been talking for months about this potential trade. They weren't going to get a first-round pick for him. Donovan McNabb didn't land a first-round pick. San Antonio Holmes only landed a fifth-round pick. So to get 2 twos, I think, is the best deal they were going to get. And again, they had to do this for off-field reasons. At least they determined that as an organization, and you have to respect that. Again, this is about human beings, not just fantasy football and numbers on a stat sheet. For Miami, it solves their biggest need. They're an organization that isn't afraid to spend money. They'll be willing to give Brandon Marshall the kind of long-term deal that his play has warranted. They've got a 100-catch receiver, guy who could catch 20 balls any given Sunday. a guy who can be a game breaker. They sorely needed that. Big move for their quarterback, Chad Henne. Big move for their organization. They're trying to win now.
And that was Jason Lockenfor. And this is the breaking news on this Wednesday. Brandon Marshall sent from Denver to Miami for this year's second-round pick and Miami's second-round selection in 2011. Jamie Dukes will share his thoughts after the break.